Hi, I'm Alex Gardner, and I am doing a report on poverty for my social studies class. It is going to mainly I'm going to mainly talk about poverty in the Progressive Era, which was about the very late 1800s to about 1914. Then I'm going to be talking about the problems that poverty proposes now, like in our generation. And I'm going to give my opinions about it, maybe how I believe it could, how we could stop it. But first of all, I'm going to give the definition for poverty. Poverty is the state of one who lacks a certain amount of material possession or money. Namely, in layman's terms, that means you're poor. Not just poor, I mean like really poor. There's three different kinds of poverty, one of which is argued. The first kind is the kind everyone kind of associates with when you say poverty, is absolute poverty, meaning that you kind of really don't have anything at all. There's relative poverty relating to like economic problems, like money problems, cash flow problems, that kind of stuff. And then there's the one that people argue about: is it really a kind of poverty? And it's voluntary poverty. It's more of a religious thing. It's where someone, based on their religion, because certain people's religion believe that if you have less, in a sense, you are more pure. So the less you have means you're more pure. And so people will put themselves into poverty in the name of their own religion to make themselves pure, as their religion states. And my thoughts on whether that's poverty or not, it really shouldn't be counted as poverty just because it's personal choice. It's that person's decision. Regular poverty means that you're kind of forced into that situation. So, the poverty I'm mainly going to be talking about is absolute poverty. There's probably going to be a bit of there's probably going to be a bit of relative poverty, but mainly, absolutes. So, to start off, we're gonna be talking about why it was such a problem in the Progressive Era, poverty that is. So, it was a problem because there was a bunch of people living in downtrodden areas. It was bad conditions, people living on the streets. And I want to say that, immigrants kind of got the worst of it because they literally had no jobs. They weren't, just Americans weren't allowing them to have jobs. Americans didn't like having immigrants in our country because they were afraid they were actually going to steal our jobs. And so they got the real brunt of the blow. And one of the worst parts of poverty that, well, maybe not the worst, but something that just, I guess, would just be awful is that for immigrants, I know that it was just like there would be 20 of you or so, maybe, like a bunch of people. They would just take a bunch of people who were all impoverished and put them all in one room. That's where they lived. And maybe it would even be smaller than my room here. Let me give you an idea of how big my room is. Let's see. Oof, kind of bright, but so you get an idea. Here, let me show you back there. That's one wall. It's the back wall. That's my door. And then if I were to flip it around, there's the other wall. So you get an idea of just how small my room is. Imagine what it'd be like for people who had to live in rooms basically maybe a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit bigger than this, and most of them probably weren't even related. Can you imagine what it'd be like to, live very, very poorly impoverished, no money, really nothing, and you have to, basically sleep with someone you don't know. Can't, in very close quarters, that is. So, you get an idea of how bad it would have been for them. Um, wow. Reasons behind poverty is mainly just, not having enough jobs. You know, not having enough money to fund the jobs. If what was going on back then was that if they didn't have the money to fund the jobs, which meant that you didn't have that job. And if you ask me, one of the reasons behind not having the money to fund that job is because there was a couple of people who were very rich. They got all the money, and a couple of these people were Cornelius Vanderbilt, who was a railroad tycoon during the Progressive Era. There was John D. Rockefeller. He was a guy who got into the oil business and oil refining, and he created a monopoly, and which monopoly is where you own every other company of that same business. And then there's Andrew Carnegie, who was also a very rich man, who was a steel tycoon, I guess. So, and what that means is that they had all the money, basically. And as they got more money, and as they bought out other competitors, meant that they were taking money away from them, shutting down those businesses, also creating less jobs. And as they got more money, it was taking away money from the business itself, making jobs that needed money not have money, and then the jobs go away, making less jobs, making less people actually have jobs. And the way we kind of got out of that, and the way we got out of the poverty of that big time was World War One. There was several factors that actually kind of helped. Several people were helping to combat, poverty. Namely, one of the most well known being Jane Addams, who started the house. Can't think of the name off the top of my head, and I'm not gonna go look. But she made the house for the poor. And what I meant is that while people were there, they they were fed, you know, just taken care of in all senses of the word. The government actually helped a little bit with the poverty in an attempt to, you know, you know, stop it. What they did is that they created food stamps. Food stamps being that once a month you're given enough money to provide food for you and your family. Sometimes just you, sometimes just your family. They came up with income tax. Income tax being that depending on how much income you had or money that you made, depending on how much tax you had to pay. So, let's say someone didn't have a job. They didn't really make any money at all. Sometimes here and now again they made money, which meant that they had a very, very low income tax. They didn't have to pay a whole lot from their income tax, which meant that in general they got more, money for the buck. Whereas someone who, made a lot of money would have to pay more income tax. So that's how they did it. They deal with that. And then the last thing that I can think of that they did was welfare. Welfare being that, the more, you know, wealthy people would have to pay money. It would go from their tax. Most of it would go towards the government. Some of it would go into a welfare fund, which was sent to, more impoverished people. And that really kind of solved and that was really, that was a serious fight against poverty. One of the things that really got our country out of poverty at that time was going to war during World War One. It amped up, weapons manufacturing and everything that needed to be made for war. Like everything had to be made so that for all the jobs were coming up where people would go work in factories, and that's how we got it at that time. And then we went into the Big Depression after the war, during about the 20s and the 30s, and briefly during the 40s. And that's where we had the whole mafia time in our history. And that's where Capone got famous, and then it was called the Depression for a reason. It's because it was just awful. There was no jobs, no way around, just basically everyone was impoverished except for the wealthy people. They were still making money. So, again, it was just bad. So, and then we got out of that depression with World War II. It was basically the same way as World War One. So, poverty nowadays. Poverty nowadays is still a problem across the world. Not really even here anymore. We don't hasn't seemed to be a big deal here, though it doesn't mean it's not a big deal in general. It's still a very serious problem around the world, and it'd be nice if we could fix it. But poverty, being what it is just something that you don't really fix. To fix poverty, in theory, you would have to have a colossal amount of money, like literally an unending amount of money, an unending amount of jobs, and a lot of people willing to take those jobs to earn that money, so everyone is making money. That'd be how you get out of it. And third world countries, that's not really an option because they don't have money in general to fund jobs, to fund people who go to those jobs, because they really don't have jobs nor money to fund the jobs. So, meaning that they just aren't making money, meaning that they're basically all impoverished, and it's just bad conditions. People, sometimes mainly there's just no houses. They live in huts. Sometimes not even huts, just on the ground. It's 10 times worse than what it was for us. We make such a big deal of it when really it wasn't that bad. Not for us. For them, it's so much worse. My thoughts on fixing poverty. I can't think of a very sound way to do it. I can't think of it. I mean, going to war won't work again because, everything's automated. All the weapons basically get made by themselves through machines, of course. The going to plus, we haven't gone to war for like 80 years. The last time we actually declared war was World War II, meaning that, just, I don't know. But, again, poverty is a very serious problem. It does need to be fixed. How the government decides to help other people in other nations, I don't know. Hopefully they do. It would definitely be nice, while we're all living up the high life, their kids, having to go sleep on the ground. While I'm recording this with my brand new laptop, there are kids who, don't even have a house. Just awful. Well, I'm running out of time. That was my project. It was on poverty, about the progressive era. I hope everyone enjoyed. Classmates, hope you enjoyed. Scott, I'm watching you.